Sticky buns, cinnamon buns, monkey bread, any kind of coffee cake. Pretty much, I love anything made with cinnamon, especially when it comes to brunch or breakfast. And this sounds like it's, well, right up my alley. It's got soft yeasted cake underneath and a big blanket of huge streusel crumbs on top. I mean, it sounds like paradise.
This is totally your kind of thing. As you know, cinnamon breakfasty things are not my kind of thing.
That's right.
But I love this because it reminds me of my grandmother's kuchen. That bottom layer, that cake layer, is a little bready. It has yeast in it, and it's really strong because it needs to support all those crumbs on top. It all starts with the cake, and that's what we're gonna start with first. Here we have 2 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour. Now, we tried for the recipe for the cake and the crumbs to use as many similar ingredients, so you don't have to buy a lot or prep a lot, but they both need different kinds of flour. AP flour, crucial for here, again, for structure to support the crumbs.
Makes sense.
To this, we're gonna add 3/4 cup of whole milk, just a little bit of sugar. This is a 1/4 cup of sugar, and for a breakfast Danish, that's not a lot. 1 whole egg. And this is a packet of instant yeast, about 2 1/4 teaspoons. So we'll sprinkle that right in. Last but not least, a little salt. 3/4 teaspoon of table salt. We're just gonna stir this together. Just combine them. Just wanna get it a head start before you put it on the mixer. We're gonna put it on low for about 2 minutes or so until the dough comes together. All right, so that dough has come together. Now it's time to add 6 tablespoons of butter, a tablespoon at a time. And I'm gonna wait until that butter is nicely incorporated before I add the next. All right, now I'm gonna crank the speed up a little bit to about medium-high, and we're gonna let it really go till the dough is nice and webby, and that takes about 6 minutes.
All right.
All right, hard to talk over that mixer sometimes.
It's super webby in there,
It is. That's gluten buildup. That's what we want to make a good, strong cake to support those crumbs.
There you go.
All right, time to put it into its pan, and this is just your average 9 by 13 baking dish. We greased it with some vegetable oil spray. And if you notice, it's a greased spatula. This is a very sticky dough. So do the best you can with your spatula, but you're eventually gonna have to go in there with your hands. The trick to that, a little flour. Just a little flour.
It's like a sweetened focaccia.
That sticky dough makes such a chewy, almost bready cake. And you can see I'm really being careful to keep flouring my hands so that it doesn't stick. The more you can press it out even now, the better off you are, because this is gonna rise, the yeast is gonna work its magic, and when it rises, you don't wanna manhandle it too much because you wanna keep that air in the cake. So now's your time to really get it nice and even. So we're gonna cover this with plastic, let it rise in a nice warm place for about an hour.
All right, and if you'd like to check out the make-ahead instructions for our crumb buns, well, go to our website. That's cookscountry.com.
All right, so while that dough is rising, we're gonna focus on the most important part, the crumb topping. There aren't many ingredients, but the amounts of each really matter. So starting with the butter, this is 18 tablespoons of melted unsalted butter. If you use more, they're greasy. If you use less, they're too hard. Next up, sugar. We tried using all white sugar, too dry. All brown sugar, too wet. Combo, perfect.
Right, Goldilocks.
Exactly. 3/4 cup of dark brown sugar. You could use light brown, but dark brown makes a little more flavor. 3/4 cup of white sugar. Cinnamon, your favorite part.
There it is.
A whopping 1.5 teaspoons.
Love it.
A little salt to bring everything together. This is 1/2 teaspoon of salt. We're gonna whisk this together until there's no clumps left and some of the sugar has dissolved. All right, now it's time to add the flour. And remember how I said at the beginning, we're gonna use 2 types of flour. The cake needs AP flour. In here, it just made the crumbs that were way too hard and tough. So you have to use cake flour here.
All right, so all-purpose in the cake, but cake in the streusel.
That's it. And this is 4 cups of cake flour. We're gonna add this and we're gonna stir it together. And this almost makes like a cookie dough. Oh yeah. And it just takes a little bit of time to stir this together by hand. We really gotta work these last bits of flour into this dough. This is the hardest and most important part of the recipe right here. Oh, that's looking good. Now I'm gonna let this sit for about 10 minutes, really let that flour hydrate before we sprinkle it on top of the dough and bake it.
All right.
The cake has risen. This has rested for 10 minutes. It's time to put the two together.
Yes.
So this takes a little bit of time, great time to get your friends involved. Now, if this at this time, you see the dough's pulled away from the sides of the dishes, don't hesitate to get in there with lightly floured hands and really push it back.
Okay.
But didn't happen to us this time.
All right.
So the key is pick up a piece of dough, crumble it into 1/2-inch crumbles or so. And this takes a while because there's a lot of crumb topping.
Well, it's kind of fun anyway.
Totally fun.
Get the kids involved.
Exactly.
Yeah, you don't want too small pieces.
That's right.
Right. Now, if you'd used the streusel right away without allowing that 10-minute rest, it just would have been too crumbly, falling apart too much?
You know, it's a fairly dry dough when it's going into a hot oven. It would have tasted dusty.
Okay.
So it just allows that flour to hydrate so it doesn't taste so raw.
Right. You know, the good news is it's fully covered, and the great news is
There's
we
more.
have this much more to put on.
It's true.
It's the gift that keeps on giving.
This guy is ready for the oven. We're gonna bake it at 350 degrees for about 35 minutes until a skewer can be inserted into the center and comes out clean. Oh, that looks terrible.
You should give it all to me for me to dispose, Julia. Brown and crumbly and oh, yes.
All right, so to test the doneness, we're just gonna poke it with a skewer right in the middle, pull it out, and you're looking for a very clean skewer, no sign of batter or any raw crumb.
All right.
And it is done. It is also insanely hot.
Yes.
We have to let it cool until it's completely cool. That takes about 3 hours. All right, it is cooled and ready to go. Now to get this out of the pan, we're gonna use 2 spatulas, and I'm just kind of shoving them down one side, and then you kind of loosen it.
Oh.
See how that, yeah.
Heavily greased pan pays off.
That's
here.
it. Then I'm gonna slide the spatulas under the cake and lift it out. That's it, and look at that.
Oh, wow.
Easy peasy. Now we're gonna cut into 12 good-sized pieces, and to do that, I'm gonna cut it in half, and I'll just deal with half here. Oh, that looks like a good size. There we
Long
go.
slicing knife is paying off
Oh
there.
yeah, and I'm gonna separate them a little so that when I dust with sugar, it really gets all over. And a little trick with powdered sugar is get a fine mesh strainer, and then you spoon the sugar into the strainer, and then you just kind of hit it over the top,
Beautiful.
and it's snowing.
So we actually tried to figure out what the difference between New York crumb cake, New York crumb buns, New Jersey crumb cake, New Jersey crumb buns are. What we found was a lot of people had different definitions
Yes.
of these 2 desserts. But we're calling it New Jersey crumb buns because we found that in New Jersey it really is all about the crumb. Much lower amount of cake to crumb ratio.
A nice, slightly larger size for you.
These look like crumb buns from Wonderland. You're right. I love that bit of yeast in there. It makes it not too sweet. Actually, the crumb cake itself is not really that sweet at all.
No.
It's just a hint of
No.
sweetness. Thank you, Julia. Well, you have got to try these crumb buns. They are A1 awesome. Now, it starts with a sturdy and rich dough. You work butter right into the dough, pat it into a pan, and let it rise. In the meantime, mix butter, 2 sugars, cinnamon with flour, and then break it up into pieces and scatter that all over the dough for a huge blanket of streusel crumbs. Bake it, let it cool, then dust with a snow shower of confectioner's sugar. So from Cook's Country and the Garden State, the most amazing New Jersey crumb buns.
Cheers.
Cheers. Clunk. Thanks for watching Cook's Country from America's Test Kitchen. So what'd you think?
Leave a comment and let us know which recipes you're excited to make, or just say hi.
Now you can find links to today's recipes and reviews in the video description.
And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.
See you later.
Alligator.